Hello, everyone. In this lesson, we'll study mock modules for testing. Let's start with our sentry.ts file on the backend. Now we're determining whether to enable our sentry based on whether Node.env is set to test. Then we initialize it based on that and also check this when trying to catch exceptions. And this is the point where our tests interfere with our main code, which is not considered very good. To solve this, one of the methods is a mock module. Let's apply it. From this point on, we don't need to consider our Node.env here, and essentially return everything as it was. Simply, if there's in sentry.ts, then send it. If not, don't send it. Nevertheless, we will now change the function's behavior, and this file is for our test environment. We will create a file called sentry-mock.ts. It's just a convention we've decided upon for naming such files this way, and we can do the following. Write jest.mock, the file path, and then we indicate that we want to create a mock file. Thanks to this, in tests, well, some other things need to be specified, but ultimately, in tests, all functions exported from this file will do absolutely nothing. That is, their content will not be called. They can still be called in the code, and the code won't break, but they won't return anything and nothing will happen. This is what we need for Sentry. The only thing is that currently it's set up so that Sentry initializes right at the moment of import, and this is also not very good. So let's move the initialization into a separate function and call it when we need to initialize Sentry. Let's do this. Export const init Sentry. And there is the same code. Good. Like this. And now we need to initialize it. Initialize it directly in the index.ts file. And do this from the very beginning. Insert here. Init Sentry. Great. Now, for the mock module to work, we need to call it somewhere. Because right now we just created a file and just doesn't know about its existence. We know we import our happy helpers into all our integration tests. So we go to backend test integration.ts and import our mock here. Okay? Import mock. Good. It needs to be imported at the very beginning, so it works, and later all imported and called functions work properly too. Okay, so let's do a check now. Let's first take, without the imported mock, in the test, let's pick some test. For instance, notify about most liked ideas. And here, for some reason, we'll send an exception to Sentry. Sentry. What was it called again? Aha. Sentry capture exception. Sentry capture exception. New error. Oops. Let's call it. And to make sure it gets called, we'll put a console log here. Moreover, right here, maybe a console log. So, here, 1, and here we'll put 2. Good. So, we've managed this one. And now, let's try running our tests for this file. pmp.if test. So, we see that exceptions were sent, considering that we have a backend in the center of DSN, and it was specified. They also passed this check. We don't need this behavior in tests. So, now let's enable our mock. Let's go to the integration test and uncomment it. What's going to happen now? As we can see, these console logs disappeared. At the same time, the function executed normally, and when we encountered the capture exception in the center here, it simply did nothing. So, for the center, this approach will suit us. That's it. From here, we can remove it, and also remove unnecessary console logs there. Great. What code is still subject to modification, so to speak, due to the tests? This is our brevo.ts, and here we ask it not to send emails in this case. I propose writing another test for this function, namely, notify about most liked ideas, and check that users actually receive the necessary email. And in this test on idea checking, we will monitor how many times and with what arguments the send email function was called. But to pull all this off, we'll need to refactor our code a bit. If we look into our emails.ts file right now, it can actually be fundamentally divided into two sections. That is, this function, and this function are responsible for the back-end work of sending emails. And these functions are responsible for sending emails in our code. And in order to make it easier for us to write mock modules, let's split all this into different files. So, in connection with this, we do the following. Create a folder here, emails. Okay. And in it, I suggest splitting the code into the following two files. So, the first file will be called utils.ts, and that's where these functions will go. So, take it out, paste here, clean unnecessary imports, and fix paths. Okay. Good. For the rest, leave the content as it is for now. Great. And we need an index.ts file for convenient importing later. And we'll move our other files with functions there. Like this, we can remove these. They're no longer needed here. These functions will go there, in index.ts. Okay, along with all the imports. Okay, and send email needs to be imported here now. From here, it imports. Okay, hold on. Made a little mistake. Send welcome email should go here. Yes. Okay. And send a mail should be imported from there. Yes. Good. Now it can be imported. Tils. And the root needs to be imported. Okay, good. Break it down. Now, to determine how many times the send email function was called, we need to mock it as well. With this, we create a file utils.mock.ts. So, and here our mock will be more complex than the one for Sentry. Here we have the following content for the mock. What does it mean? The beginning is the same. We specify which module we are mocking, and accordingly, when we import something from here into our tests, this implementation will be used. Then in original, we import our actual current utils.ts. Here, theoretically, in this utils.s, there could be more functions than needed, but we want to override only the send-a-mail function. For this, there's such code. We write, well, it's just type definitions. Here, just melon. This is how a mock is created. And here, we can pass our new implementation. In our new implementation, nothing happens. It just returns. Return OC true. Just like our send-a-mail always returns some kind of OK. but within the mock, it will always be OC.true. All right? And we return what the .utils module should import, IOININT, everything from the original as well as the send-a-mail function, but now mocked here. And thanks to this, in the future, we will be able to check how many times and how this function was called. Good. And now, when we have moved everything, we can clean up our imports and delete the old file. Because we have extracted everything from it, so we delete it, then we need to add our mock to our helpers file. So sendermock, then emails.utilsmock. Great. And we can proceed to writing tests using our send-a-mail function. Good. Since we are testing the function in the same file, we add tests again in the same test file. Now we have this test, and we want to add another one. And since we're testing some new function, we'll add a new describe block. So now we're testing this function and stating what it should do. Send a list of ideas to users. Essentially, we need the same data here as we had in the previous function. So this whole part will essentially need to be copied right now. We'll move this into a separate function, and we'll call it createData. It will have this content, so nothing new, just extracted the function. Now let's use it in the old test. So, here we need to define our now. It will stay, and we'll pass now further into the function, and we don't need the data itself here. So, await, createData, and we pass now into it. Good. So, this test should ideally work just as before. We haven't fundamentally changed anything here, and our new test will look like this. Let's dissect it. We're testing this function. What does this function do? This function simply sends an email to all our users. During the data creation stage, there were 4 users created. Here's how many authors. Oh no, it turns out to be 5 users, because 5 we created with the author. All right, based on this, we understand we will slightly adjust this function now, because now, again, we need to provide information about the current date and the limit. Here, we have a send email function that we just import from our emails.ts file. We just import it, and we say that we expect it to have been called 5 times. Then we can request an array of all its calls. To do this, it's done like this. jest.mocked. The function is passed, and then mocked.calls. And in it, there will simply be an array of all its calls. Well, specifically, one call is determined by the arguments that were passed to it. And then we need to tidy up these calls to remove any unnecessary information. We call our familiar without noise. What will we do? So, all calls, I think we'll do a console log now. Let's see what was in the original. Here are all the calls. We take the first argument. What comes in here is an array of arguments. We pass one argument here, send a mail. He simply takes an object as the first argument. Here it is. And we take these props from the first argument and tidy them up. All right. Here we have an array of all arguments again. And with the familiar too much inline snapshot, we get the following result. So first we checked that there are 5, and then we look at their content. In this test, it was known that with a limit of 2, we get this result. meaning this is the first and second idea with 3 and 2 likes respectively. And we see that send email was called with parameters, such and such subject, such template name, such template variables. Okay. We don't see the idea ID here, even though it was passed, due to the removal of noise. As we know, our IDs are new and unique each time a test runs, so we don't need them. And we can simply determine that it's the one we need by the idea's title itself. And we've sent the same email 5 times, but to 5 different users, which is what we needed. So now let's fix some errors that occurred here and try to run this test. Okay. Well, first of all, we need to tidy up this function and import it so that it accepts not only the context, as it does now, but also other arguments. I generally recommend, when writing functions, if it takes more than one argument, let it take just one that is an object. Let it now be defined like this. So, we pass an object there, it's the context. Limit now. Why is it more convenient to pass an object to a function? Because you no longer have to worry about the order of arguments. Also, if you want to, for example, pass only the third and not the second, you'll have issues. You'll still have to somehow pass the second. But in an object, you can pass only the keys you need. So, according to this logic, I also suggest rewriting the way our former function is called. Let it also accept an object. Fundamentally, nothing will change. But now you can pass only what's needed to this object. Okay, now we still need to fix its calls. It was called here. It's only in tests. All right, let's fix it. Now it looks like this. Okay? CTX, limit. And now, how is it passed? And here is CTX, limit. Now, good. Okay. And there, I think. Jest was complaining about something, but it's stopped now. Okay, let's run this test and see how it works. pnpm btest. Something went wrong. Let's figure it out. Look, we're being told that we've passed a function here which is not a mock. But how? We've specified in our helpers file that we're mocking our email. Everything seems mocked correctly. So what's the problem? Here's the issue. And this may initially be unexpected. If we look at the order of our imports, we will see that email was imported first, and only then the mock. If our mock had been imported earlier, then, in theory, everything would have worked. Let's check. Okay. Well, at least we don't have the same error. We'll deal with this later. First, let's return to this. You see, it's important in what order things are imported. And we need to make sure that everything imported from helpers is at the very beginning of the imports. Then everything else so that mocks work fine. But we have ESLint, which takes care of everything on its own. See? It will be inconvenient to go through each file, move it to the top, and write something like disable import order for entire file. That would be uncomfortable. Better to configure ESLint to understand that these files should be at the very top. Let's do it. Let's go to our ESLint on the backend and add a rule. The rule is as follows: import order. In general, you can dig into the documentation and understand how everything is sorted. Here. And how do we set it up here? The most important part of this config is here. that these are imports of this type, meaning they are from this folder or 2 folders back. Then any number of test integration folders. We say that we assign this to the built-in group, and we ask, not in the built-in group. We ask for these imports to be before the built-in. The built-in is at the very top. Based on this, we understand that it will be even higher than what we have at the top. So, and then some parameters for how to sort it further. But this is our key idea for ESLint. Everything else is in the documentation. You just need to set it up once, then reuse it. I don't want to dig into the breakdown of this documentation. Now, save and check. Oh, that's it. It now stands at the very top on its own. This is what we needed. So, now let's go back to our test and see what it's complaining about now. So, it says it detected some URLs here, and they depend on our n variables. Well, in general, we've trimmed them. They didn't make it into our match online snapshot. That is, if I hadn't copied this code, but invoked it, the URLs would have essentially made it into match online snapshot. But the URLs contain a link that depends on our n variables, and that's not good. So I think URLs are junk too. So let's add the understanding that this is junk in our garbage filtering function. Okay? And we'll just add another regex. So if something starts and ends with URL, meaning literally equals URL, then we filter it out too. Let's run our tests again. And now everything matches what it was. All right. Let's see, for the purpose of learning, what was originally stored in calls. Console, calls. Yes, well, Okay, running the test again. Here. And we see that there's an array. And each element is another array. It's an array of arguments, here. But since we always pass only one argument to send email, this one will take it from props as just the first argument, here. And this is the full content of the call. Here. And thanks to this, we can test things without sending real emails. Okay? Well, great. That's what we achieved. And let's reinforce this. We've mocked our emails, haven't we? But just in case, let's also mock Brevo itself, because we still have this check in Brevo. We will also remove it and create a mock for Brevo. But this will be much easier, because we already know how to do everything we need here. We remove this information about node.env. We create a file. We create a file, brevo.mock.ts, with the following content. So, what? We again define the path to the file, import the original, and replace the function sendEmail through Brevo. Why mock this one? Well, firstly, because we don't even import this one externally. Secondly, when you receive SMS, you might want to mock differently, and return some other response. Technically, you could mock the makeRequest function to Brevo and force it not to execute. But I particularly like to mock certain functions. So, we mock it, and again, under the hood, it does nothing but returns this logable response, just like the original function. The original function also returns the original response, but we marked it as optional to align the types. So, and logable response only includes these 3 fields. These are what we return. That's it. And now, when we've mocked this module, we need to add it to our helpers so that Jess knows we've mocked it. So, and librevo.mock. Okay, so we also cleaned up this function, and it's used in our cron job, and the types broke. We need to fix that since we now pass it as an object. All right, we remembered and did it. So, well, probably just need to check that all the tests work together. PNPM B test. Yes. Good. All tests pass. Emails are not sent during tests, and we removed the test-related logic from our main logic and moved it to our mock modules. Thanks, everyone. Let's use mocks and move on. See you soon.